speaker of the day is hopefully is able to speak. Xavier is Xavier Erny.
Please share my screen. Normally it should be okay.
Yes, it works.
Okay, in full screen.
Yes, seems like it. So our last speaker is Xavier Erny from Université d'Evry. So it's in the Paris neighborhood in France. And he will be speaking about conditional propagation of chaos for mean field system of neurons.
Okay, so thanks for the invitation. So this is a joint work that I've done with my thesis directors, which are Eva Lecharbar and Dasha Lukianova. So in the first time, I will present you the model of a neural network, which is very close to the one that was shown by Quentin and Eva, with still a huge difference. And the goal of this talk is to prove the convergence of this network as the number of neurons goes to infinity. So let me begin by recalling some basic properties of neural network, just to explain what the model takes into account. So here we assume that the neural activity of a network is characterized by the spike times of the neuron. So for each neuron, we model the set of its spike times by a point process, and we define as a random set of positive numbers. And as you probably already know, the spike rate of a neuron depends on its potential. And each time a neuron receives a spike, its potential is modified. So this is basically the interaction that we want to model. So to model a network of n neuron, we model it by a system of n point processes. So for each neuron, we define a point process Zni, which counts its spike times, the number of its spike times. And we assume that each point process admits a stochastic intensity of the form f of xni. So this intensity is the spike rate of the neuron I. And this process xni models the potential of the neuron I. And in the models that we'll talk, it will be solution of a stochastic differential equation with jumps directed by the point processes Z and J, which is exactly the same framework as the one presented by Eva and Quentin. So the kind of equation that we look is this one, with typically two kind of terms. So the first kind of term are the drift terms that will model the dynamic of the potential xni when there is no spike in the network. And there will be a jump term that will model the effect of the spikes on the potentials. So here, for example, when a neuron J sends a spike to a neuron I at time t, what happens exactly for xni is that at time t, it does a jump of height ujit. So this uji can be seen as the synaptic weight between the neurons J and I. So the question that we'll that want to study in this model is a question of the convergence of the system Xn as the number of neurons n goes to infinity. So to study this kind of question, we need to rescale this sum in red to avoid it to explode and to force it to converge. So as far as I know, there exist two kinds of scaling that can work to converge. So the most natural one that we have seen in the previous talk is the linear scaling in 1/n. So this is the convergence result with this scaling corresponds to some law of large numbers type result. So this scaling will be studied in a lot of models. Here I've written two references that are close to this equation. So the first one is an article of Delatte, Fournier, and Hoffman about Hawkes processes. And the second one, an article of Chevalier, Duarte, Lecharbar, and Host that is really close to this equation, except that the synaptic weight does not depend on time. And the other scaling in which will be more interesting in the following is the diffusive scaling, that is 1/square root of n, to recover some central limit theorem. So with this diffusive scaling, we need to consider the synaptic weight to be random variables that are centered, to be in a CLT framework. So this model that we have also studied with my study directors, but I won't speak about this model in this talk, but another model that corresponds to this model with the reset jump term, with the reset jump that we have seen earlier in the previous talks. So, and the goal of this talk is to study this model with a reset jump in the diffusive scaling. But in the first time, let me explain how it works in the linear scaling, just to see the basic properties of the model. But this model has still been explained earlier, actually. So what's interesting in this kind of equation is that it is natural for a neural model. because it can be interpreted in the following way. So here, this drift in minus alpha x means that each time, when a neuron doesn't receive any spike, its potential goes by itself to 0 at exponential speed. So here 0 is assumed to be the resting value of the potentials. Then we have a small jump term. So here we speak about small jump because the height of the jump vanishes. So this small jump describes the effect of the spikes of one neuron to the potential of the others. Because you see that x and I does a small jump when the neuron I receives a spike from another neuron j different from I. And then the last jump term, which is a reset jump term, describes the effect of a spike of one neuron to its potentials. Because what happens exactly when the neuron I sends a spike for the potential x and I is that x and I does a jump of height minus x and I. In other words, it jumps to 0. So this models the repolarization of the neuron. So this equation has been studied by Assarazeno, these references. So the two first ones study exactly this equation with different kind of questions. And the third one study a generalization of this equation in a Makin-Vlasov framework. And the goal of this talk is to speak not about exactly this model, but the same model in the diffusive scaling. So the difference is in the small jump term. So here the scaling is in 1 over square root of n, and there are these random centered variables that are here to be in a CLT framework. So in the following, we don't know the distribution of these random variables. So we assume that nu is a law on R that is centered with a finite third moment. And we will note sigma square its variance. So the dynamic of x and I is still easy to explain, very similar to the previous one. So as long as there is no spike in the network, the dynamic effect of x and I is just directed by its drift, minus alpha x. So x and I evolves as the function exponential minus alpha. And when there is a spike, there are two possibilities for x and I. Either the spike comes from another neuron j different from I. In this case, x and I does a small jump. So now the height of the small jump is of the form ujt over square root of n, where j is the neuron that has emitted the spike, t is the spike time, and n the number of neurons in the network. And the second case is if it is the neuron I that has emitted the spike. In this case, x and I jumps to 0, as we have seen before. So the goal of this talk is to prove the convergence of this system xn as n goes to infinity. So before proving this convergence, let us explain how the limit system behaves using some heuristics. So what we can observe in our equation here is that the only term that actually depends on n explicitly is a small jump term in blue. So the goal of the heuristic is to study this blue term. To do this, we introduce this process mn, which is more or less the same. The only difference is one index in the sum. So basically, if we manage to prove that mn converge to some limit process that we will note m bar, we will know that the blue term here will converge to the same limit process m bar. And so the limit equation should be this one, which is exactly the same as the previous one, except that we have replaced the blue term by its limit. So here, the goal of the heuristic is to determine an explicit expression for this process m bar. So to begin with, what we know about Mn is that it's a discontinuous local martingale whose jump height vanishes as n goes to infinity. So its limit, if it exists, is a continuous local martingale. And so it can be written as a stochastic integral with respect to a Brownian motion that we will note W. So to obtain an explicit expression for this process m bar, the only thing to do is to compute its quadratic variation, which can be written as the limit of that of Mn, which can be obtained directly. So, a priori, m bar should satisfy this kind of equality. And what we do now is that we write this rescaled sum as a function f integrated with respect to the measure mu bar ns, which is the empirical measure of the n first coordinates of the limit system. Now, if we assume that this sequence of empirical measures mu bar n converges to some limit measure that we will note mu, we will know that the limit process m bar should have this form. And so the limit equation should have this one. So now, to end our heuristic, let us give some properties that mu satisfies. So according to our previous reasoning, we know that mu is the limit of the empirical measures of the limit system, which is an exchangeable and an infinite system. So according to classical results about exchangeability, we know that mu is what is called the directing measure of the system. In particular, it exists, it is unique, N can be characterized by what is written inside the parenthesis. That is, conditionally on the directing measure mu, the coordinates of the system are IID mu distributed. And another thing that can be said about the directing measure of a limit system, of an exchangeable system, is that if we find a sigma field such that conditionally to the sigma field, the coordinates are IID, it implies that the directing measure of the system can be written as a conditional law of any coordinate given the sigma field. And what we can observe in our limit system is the fact that the Broad motion W that appears in the equations is the same for all the coordinates. And so this W is a common noise in our limit system. And this is why we need to condition by W to make the coordinate IID. And so the directing measure should be the law of any coordinate given the W. In particular, we can replace this multi-F in the equations explicitly by a conditional expectation given W. So now we have an explicit expression for our limit equation. One problem is that it's not standard at all, because we can say of it to be a conditional Mac-Kimmelstoff equation, because here we have a coefficient that depends on the conditional law of the solution of the equation. So natural question that can be asked is this equation well posed? So the answer is yes under suitable assumptions. Here I won't prove the well posedness, but I can give you a general condition under which we can guarantee it. So the condition is this one. If you consider a function f that is C1 bounded, lower bounded, and such that the derivative satisfies this kind of inequality. In this case, we improve the well posedness of the previous equation. And what's interesting in this kind of function is that it allows to consider a function f of the following form. And to understand why this function f is interesting in a neural model, let me recall that the function f gives the spike rate of a neuron as a function of its potential. And so this kind of function can be interpreted in the following way. When the potential x and I of a neuron is bigger than some value x0, it means that the spike rate of the neuron is close to its maximal value. And so the neuron is active. On the contrary, when x and I is smaller than x0, it means that the spike rate is close to its minimal value, which can be chosen close to 0. And so the neuron is inactive, in the sense that there is very small chance that it sends a spike. Okay, so now let me show you some simulation of trajectories of the process xn1, which models the potential of one neuron in a network of n neurons. And we can see on the right picture the time intervals when the neuron is active and when it is inactive. And you can also deduce from that the spike time of the neuron, which are the time at which the neuron goes from active to inactive, because of this reset jump that forces the potential to jump to 0. Okay, so now let me speak about the main part of this talk, which is the convergence of the system Xn to the system X bar. So it's the convergence in distribution in coordinate space, which is D. So the space of Kardec function endowed with an appropriate topology. So what is not? So this is basically typically the kind of results that we call the conditional proportion of chaos, because here the limit system is not IID but only conditionally IID, because of this Brownian motion that is what is a common noise in this limit system. So what's not really convenient in this convergence is the fact that the size of the system Xn is n, which is a parameter that goes to infinity. So instead of looking directly to this convergence, we study another one, which is equivalent, which is the convergence of the empirical measure μn of Xn to the directing measure mu of X bar. Convergence still in distribution, and now in the space P of D, so which is a space of probability measures on D, endowed with the topology of the weak convergence. So to prove this convergence distribution, we do a two-step procedure that is classical. The first step consists in showing that the sequence μn is tight, and the second one, that all the converging subsequences of μn have the same limit. So here I won't speak of the first step because it's really classical. It's actually a consequence more or less straightforward of Aldous criterion. So we just speak about the second step, where we show that any limit of μn in distribution is solution of a martingale problem. So to formulate our martingale problem, let us consider Q in P of D. So here Q represents the law of the directing measure of the limit system. And we formulate our martingale problem on this canonical space, omega equals P of D times D square. meaning that an atomic element is composed of 3 random variables, mu, which is a law on D, and 2 Kardec processes, Y1 and Y2. So what has to be kept in mind to understand the form of this martingale problem is that mu represents the directing measure of the limit system, and Y1 and Y2 represents 2 different coordinates of the limit system. For example, you can keep in mind that Y1 equals X bar 1 and Y2 equals X bar 2, for example. So the structure that we want on this space omega is that conditionally on mu, Y1 and Y2 are IID mu distributed. So we will undo this space omega with this probability measures P, which means exactly that mu, which corresponds to the set I, is Q distributed, and conditionally on mu equals M, Y1 and Y2 are IID M distributed, which is exactly the structure that we want. Then we say that Q is solution to the martingale problem if for all function G that is smooth enough, the process GYT minus GY0 minus integral of some generator is a martingale, where the form of the generator L will reflect the form of the limit equation. So let me recall it just here to make it clear. And the expression of the generator is this one. So in this expression, there are some terms, and each term corresponds to a term of the limit equation. For example, here the 2 first terms, which are the first order partial derivatives terms, correspond to the drift term. Then the second order partial derivatives term correspond to the Brownian term, and the term of the second line to the John term of the limit equation. Now let me explain a point that I've not explained yet, which is why in this martingale problem do we consider two different coordinates of the limit system, Y1 and Y2, and why not just one? Actually, it's because we want to be able to recover from the form of this generator the interactions that exist in the limit system. In other words, we want to be able to read in this expression the correlations between 2 different particles of the limit system. So the interaction that we want to be able to recover is the fact that the Brownian motion W that appears in the equation is the same for all the coordinates. And you can see this property on the blue term of the generator, because you can see in this term that the coefficient that correspond to the diagonal derivatives and the coefficient that corresponds to the cross derivatives is always the same. It's always the sigma square of 2 times mf. And this is what implies the underlying Brownian motions is necessarily the same for both particles. Because, for example, if we had 2 independent Brownian motions, so one for each particle, then the coefficient of the cross derivative should have been 0, which is not the case here. So now to prove our convergence of mu into mu, we just need to prove 2 properties of this martingale problem. The first one is that there is a unique solution to this problem, which is the law of the directing measure of the limit system. And the second one is that any limit of subsequence of mu n is solution to this martingale problem in distribution. So I won't speak very much about the first property because it is the most natural, since we have constructed this martingale problem from the form of the limit equation in such a way that it was possible to recover all the information of the limit system. So here, if we consider Q any solution of this martingale problem, we can reconstruct the limit system from the form of this generator. And so we can prove that Q is necessarily the law of the directing measure of the limit system. So this is the only solution, the only possible solution of this martingale problem. So now let me just speak about the second property, which is this one. If you consider mu a limit of a subsequence of mu n, then the law of mu is solution to the martingale problem. That is, the expectation of f of mu has to be 0 for any function f of this form. So here the form of the function f is more or less classical, because what we want to prove is that some process is a martingale. So here in front of the brackets, we have the dependency with respect to the path of the process. So let's say what happened before some time s. And in the brackets, we have the increasing of the process between s and t. That depends on the generator L. So to study this kind of function, we need to recall what is the generator. So let me do it here with the drift terms, the jump terms, and the Brownian term. And now to prove that the expression of mu is 0, what we do is that we prove that the expectation of f of mu n vanishes as n goes to infinity. So we need to write what is f of mu n, and we write it differently using the fact that mu n is the empirical measure of the n particle system Xn. In particular, this integral with respect to mu(n) times mu(n) can be written explicitly as a rescaled double sum, precisely like this. And now, to prove that the expectation of this expression vanishes, what we do is to write differently the first term in the brackets. So the term in phi x n t minus phi x n s, here, in the top right. We write it differently using Ito's formula, which would make appear the different terms of the limit equation, of the equation of xni, xnj. So there will be the drift terms, the resurgent terms, and the Brownian term. And then the goal is to compare term by term each term that comes from Ito's formula with its corresponding term from the generator of the Martingale problem, which are the terms on this slide in color. So basically, we'll compare the drift term, the drift terms between them, the resurgent terms between them, and the small jump term that comes from Ito's formula with the Brownian terms that is here, that comes from the generator. And we can show that for each term, the difference between the two corresponding terms always vanishes as n goes to infinity, which shows that the expression of f of mu(n) vanishes. And recalling that mu is the limit of a subsequence of mu(n) in distribution, it implies that the expectation of f of mu is 0. And so the law of mu is solution to the Martingale problem. So here, I won't show you the precise computation about when you compare the corresponding terms. But the only one that is not completely straightforward is for the blue term, when you compare the small jump term with the Brownian term. And this computation mostly relies on Taylor-Lagrange inequality. So this is not really complicated to do. So let me just recall so here we have seen all the main steps to prove the convergence of mu(n) to mu. So let me just recall this proof here to make it clear. So in the first time we have seen that the sequence mu(n) was tight. Then to prove its convergence, we consider mu a limit of convergent subsequence of mu(n). What we have just seen is that the law of mu is solution to the Martingale problem. And what we have seen earlier is that the unique solution of this Martingale problem is the law, of the directing measure of the limit system. So, as the sequence mu(n) is tight, it implies that mu(n) converges to its only possible limit. So let me just note some references. So the first one is articles that I used to do this talk, and the second one is a course about exchangeability by Aldous. And the references on the second slide are the ones that I've stated in the introduction. So I studied the same kind of question about progression of chaos or conditional progression of chaos in similar framework. So either in linear scaling or in diffusive scaling, so whenever n or whenever square root of n, and either with a reset jump term or without it. So that's why there are some variations. So thank you for your attention, and don't hesitate if you have any question.
Okay, thank you, Xavier, for a great talk. So as he said, do not hesitate to raise your hand. Seems Quentin has raised his hand, right?
Yes, I've got a question. May you re-explain how you derive the mean field limit and the integral with respect to the Brownian motion? I guess you said that you use an auxiliary particle system. That's right, or not?
For the heuristics part?
At the beginning of the sections, you explain us how you derive formally the mean field equation.
Yes. Should be there or?
Yes, just before, I think.
Okay, this one.
Yeah. So basically, how do you? Can you re-explain why the blue term here is converging to the integral with respect to Brownian motion?
Okay. So actually, the blue term is more or less the same as Mn. So here I just speak about Mn.
Okay.
Because it's a bit more simple because the blue term depends on I because of this thing, the sum. And Mn doesn't depend on I. That's why I prefer to speak about Mn.
Okay. The only difference. Okay. Understood.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So basically, they have the same limit if it exists. So for this Mn, we know that, we can prove that it's a discontinuous local martingale. And its jump height, which is vanishing because they are the form 1 over square root of n. So its limit should be still a local martingale as the limit of local martingale, and it should be continuous because the height of the jump vanishes.
Mhm.
So as continuous local martingale, it can be written as an integral with respect to a Brownian motion. So now the question is, what is the integrand? So what we put here? Here it's just the square root of its quadratic variation. So the only thing to do is to compute the quadratic variation of m bar. So we write it as the limit of that of mn, and for that of mn we can compute this directly. So here, the only difference here is that we use system x bar instead of system xn.
But UG of S is one. No, sorry. UG of S is equal to what?
Which one?
The
Oh, these are the height of the height of the jump is are the form u over square root of n, where u are random variables.
okay.
So these are the height of the jump. Well, partly, the height of the jump is UGS over square root of n. So G is the neuron is the index of the neuron that has emitted the spike, and S the jump time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Etienne, you have a question?
Yes, it's better with the microphone. Thank you, Xavier. I have a question related to the question, to the end of your answer. The processes UJ are given, or are they related to the process XI, or the law of XI, or whatever?
Well, actually, technically, when the question is formulated with this UJT, it's not completely well posed. But actually, it's a part of the point process. So here, to make it well for formal formulation, what we have to do is to write the point processes as thinning of Poisson measure, and these UJ are given by these Poisson measures. I don't know if it's really clear.
Should be.
So, can you repeat your question?
No, I'm not sure to understand if UJ is given and you put it in the dynamic of the vector X, or if UJ, I see that DZ depends on the jump of X, but the size of the jump UJ when XI has a big jump, I'm not sure to understand if this UJ of T depends or not on XI, the law of X, or whatever.
No, it does not depend on anything.
Okay, and my question was, what can you say if the interaction are not independent, so are correlated with
So if
the state of the network?
if you consider it as a function of xn, a function of
yes, for instance, yes.
Yeah, so this is another work that I've done also with Eva and Dasha. Well, in this other work, it really depends on the potential of the neuron that has emitted the spike, the neurons that received the spike, and about two random variables. One created by the ones that emitted the spike, so one UJ, and another UK, let's say, for the ones that received the spike. In this case, we also prove similar results, but the limit system is less classical. And what we obtain is that instead of having Brownian motion at the limits, we obtain white noises because of the form of the interaction that are more complicated.
Fine, thank you.
I'm not sure if Quentin has an additional question. No, huh? Forgot to raise. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, it seems that we have no further questions. So with this, I will thank Xavier and all the participants of the